This morning we're going to talk about history. I know what you're thinking. The whole Bible is history. Also, yes, unless you get to Revelation and you're a futurist. But the passage we're going to read this morning is the whole chapter of Isaiah 46, and it's great. It's a great chapter. There's some really powerful things in it. But an understanding of the historical context adds potency to it that we would otherwise miss. And knowing the history around our Bible readings, it enriches our appreciation for the Word. So, with that, let's read through Isaiah 46. It's another one of those short chapters. Isaiah 46, starting in verse 1. Bel has bowed down, Nebo stoops over. Their images are consigned to the beasts and the cattle. The thing that you carry are burdensome. The things that you carry are burdensome, a load for the weary beast. They stooped over, they have bowed down together. They could not rescue the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, you who have been born by me from birth, and have been carried from the womb. Even to your old age I will be the same, and even to your graying years I will bear you. I have done it, and I will carry you, and I will bear you and deliver you. To whom would you liken me, and make me equal and compare me, that we would be alike? Those who lavish gold from the purse and weigh silver on the scale hire a goldsmith, and he makes it into a god. They bow down, indeed they worship it. They lift it up upon the shoulder and carry it. They set it in its place, and it stands there. It does not move from its place. Though one may cry to it, it cannot answer. It cannot deliver from his distress. Remember this and be assured, recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things long past, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things which have not been done, saying, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my purpose from a far country. Truly I have spoken. Truly I will bring it to pass. I have planned it. Surely I will do it. Listen to me, you stubborn-minded, who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off, and my salvation will not delay. And I will grant salvation in Zion and my glory for Israel. All right, that was Isaiah 46. Quite powerful. Good morning, Kathleen. Good morning, Mr. Lynch. We'll definitely be praying for that. So like I said, we're focusing on some of the historical context of this chapter to see how it enriches our understanding of it. So God speaks through his prophet, Isaiah, against the idols of the nations, the idols of Babylon specifically. And he calls out Bel and Nebo. Bel and Nebo. Bel, we can pretty easily see is just another spelling of Baal or Baal, depending on how you pronounce that. But Nebo is one that's less familiar to us. He doesn't get called out as much in the Bible, hardly at all. And he goes by other names in ancient cultures. Nabu is one of them, but he was worshipped by the Babylonians. He was a big-time god among the Babylonians, and we see that in how they pay homage to him through their names. Is Nebo, so we get Nebuchadnezzar, Nabopolassar, Nebuzaradan, right? Just three biblical examples of naming people for names that come through Nebo. Belteshazzar, you get through Baal. One of the, whatever name they give Daniel, Belshazzar or Belteshazzar, but they're both in the book of Daniel. So Nebo was one of their gods. Baal, also known as Marduk to the Babylonians, was a god of the harvest, one of their big-time, like Zeus-like gods. Nebo was a god of wisdom, literature, and prophecy. Now, why is that historical detail important? Why does that matter? Why would God even call this guy out, who's not really even a god? When you look at what's happening in this chapter, you see that God is calling these idols out as useless, worthless pieces of wood and gold. And what we see in verse 2 is that these idols could not even save themselves. When Cyrus comes, who's been prophesied by name in Isaiah 100 years before his time, he will also take the idols. He's going to take Nebo, he's going to take Baal. It's like capture the flag, but on a larger scale. He beat the Babylonians, he absorbs their empire into the Persian Empire, and absorbs their idols under the flag of a different nation. Then God goes on display. He puts his prowess, his power up to show, and he says to listen up, and then promises in verse 4 to preserve them. God has the power to save and to preserve for salvation those that are his. We see this in Hebrews 7:25. Therefore, he is able to also save forever. I think King James has saved the uttermost. Those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. The preservation of the saints is one of the most precious and life-giving doctrines we have in Christianity. Otherwise, this whole thing would just depend on us. And we know that doesn't work, because that would be a works-based faith, and we are a grace-based faith. We know our works are as filthy rags. It's also in Isaiah. And we also know ourselves enough to put no confidence in our ability to be righteous. And then, in another attack on the idols, God says, there is no one like me. These paltry little gods y'all have made and carry around have no power. Though you pray to it and worship it, it has no actual ability to save you in your distress. This is a great verse in pointing out to even Mormons. You're talking to them who believe that we are going to become gods. We will be just like God. Well, there's no one like God, so that can't possibly be true. And God here, in comparing himself to the idols, he's got a track record of saving his people through and even sometimes from distresses. And this is where he goes for the throat on Nebo, and that's in verses 9 and 10 of Isaiah 46. He says, remember the former things long past, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things which have not been done, saying, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. Unlike Nebo, God can and has accurately declared the future. All things are going according to his plan. Nebo failed to warn the Babylonians about Cyrus. God informed the Israelites about 100 years in advance about Cyrus, about what's going to happen, on top of warning them repeatedly to repent, otherwise the Babylonians were coming. This is the man, Cyrus, of God's purpose. He is the bird of prey appointed to bring down a pagan nation by way of another pagan nation. This was God's good pleasure. And no other so-called God even compares to our God. Doesn't see it coming and didn't orchestrate it in the first place. So Nebo is nothing. The conclusion then is this: God has spoken. He will bring it to pass. He will do it. He is the one who brings his righteousness to us. He brings his salvation to us. And all that happens unfolds according to God's good pleasure. This morning, be comforted that what comes our way is part of the plan. It's part of God's sovereign good pleasure. We know this because we are familiar with the New Testament version of the same teaching. And that's where we're going to end today in Romans 8:28 through 31. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son, so that he would be the firstborn among many brethren. And these whom he predestined, he also called, and these whom he called, he also justified. And these whom he justified, he also glorified. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who is against us? And that's where we end. God's sovereign good pleasure ruling over all. Everything that comes our way has been known and ordained and is in his hands. And so is the whole path of our redemption, according to Romans 8, that golden chain. We love it. So with that, we're going to pray.